Welcome to the Mick, a Mook, and a Mike.
Hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer
Frank Mace, and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor.
Today's guest, founder and CEO of Fandango, environmentalist and entrepreneur, Art Levitt.
My brother
Frankie. How you doing, pal? How you doing today?
How you been?
Got the Pebble Beach hat on, huh?
I do have the Pebble Beach hat on. It's a nice hat.
It's a nice hat. It's a
Where's
nice
your
place.
hat? Where's your hat?
My wife told me my hair's starting to look good. I'm starting to grow it back, she told me.
What's the matter with your wife's eyesight?
She said, she said, that was fine when you were going bald. Now your hair's growing back.
That's pretty good.
Our guest today is Art Levitt. He's a great entrepreneur. He started Fandango. It'll be a treat to have him on today. But I want to say, what do you say to a guy who ends his interview with
That was a conversation. That wasn't an interview.
You say goodbye to me, and then you let out the biggest belch.
It's a sign off.
It's tough, Frank. It's tough. You know what I mean? These are the wounds.
Was that the GERD or
love of country? You know what I mean? That was the wounds. I tell you, I stand up, I start burping. It's like I'd be lying down watching a movie for an hour and a half, no problem. I get up to get a glass of water. It was on this like 5 minutes.
Jenny's such a lucky woman.
Oh, she's blessed. I told her this the other day. I said, you really stepped in shit the day you met me. She said, yeah. I'm still smelling it. She said. Oh, she's blessed. Oh, yeah, no doubt about it.
So what do you think about the verdict?
You know what? I know that Derek will have some controversy with this, but let me ask you a question. We just talked about 12 Angry Men.
No, we did. We're talking about that next week. But
I'm sorry. Next week we're going to be talking about 12 Angry Men. And
yeah.
You know how difficult it is to get 12 people to agree on something, right? How do you get 12 people to agree on something 34 times? I mean, obviously, not one person had a semblance of doubt, because otherwise that would have been a hung jury. At least on each case. You got 34 counts. Absolutely every one of them agreed on it. I don't see which one. Tell me what
Oh, no, I think
Get 12 people to agree on something 34 times.
Yeah, because there's three of us here, and I don't think we can agree on anything.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I'm just saying it's so, and this, this idea it's a political persecution, it's got merit.
Well,
it has some
it was
merit.
sort of like the charges were sort of like Al Capone on tax evasion.
Exactly. Let's get him on something.
Let's get him on something.
Exactly.
So we'll get him on his manifestation of
Without
justice or something like that. But
okay, so what does that say
but
to
you're
you?
still talking about, hey, you got the best lawyers or the best lawyers money can buy, certainly, whether they're the best lawyers, and I don't know. But when you get a jury, well, when you get a jury, the defense has every right to say, I don't want this guy on the jury.
yeah.
So they didn't have 12 Trump haters.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And I'm sure the lawyers will lose their job over the fact that he lost.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the rape case. I mean, look, these are 12 jurors that know a lot more about that case than us three sitting here or anybody reading the papers. I mean, they sat through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the 12 juries came back and said, all right, not only is he guilty of rape, how much is you looking for? 150? Let's give him 450.
Yeah. I believe that they decided they had to get something on the books before the election. So this was the best chance they had to get him on something. So they,
Well, let me ask you this, though, Frank. I mean, let's go back to basics with Trump. I mean, first, he starts running. The first words out of his mouth is, immigrants are all rapists and felons. Well, apparently he's a rapist and a felon. Maybe we should switch.
Of course.
But in either way, that was the first thing. Then it was the press, because the press was reporting on his attack the free press. The press is the enemy of the country. Really? The free press is the enemy of the country? Because I know Jefferson didn't feel like that. None of the founding fathers felt like that. They thought a free press was a necessity for a country. So then he attacked the press. Now it's the court system. How do you go outside a courtroom and say the judge is human scum? Should there be jail time? Probably not for the offense.
No, probably. If anybody else wouldn't have had this case brought forth.
Well, you could say the same thing about Biden, couldn't you? Biden's kid?
Well, Biden's kid's more guilty than Trump was. Biden's kid is definitely guilty.
Without a doubt, but buying a gun because while you're on drugs, normally that would be a smack on the wrist, and somebody would say, you know what? Give him a fine, give him this, don't let him take his driver's license. But I mean, it wouldn't be what's going on now.
Yeah.
So it's political, of course it is. But yeah, but for him to say that the whole court system's a shambles, while you got Menendez getting bringing up a trial, he's a Democrat. Biden's kid's a Democrat. He's not even in office.
Yeah.
So I mean, attack the justice system, attack the judge. They're afraid to give the witnesses' name out because they're even in the rape cases.
Yeah, because Trump will smear them.
So I think, okay, the crime certainly doesn't merit going to jail. I mean, it's a white-collar crime, and we all know how they deal with that in America. But just complete contempt for the judge and you got to do something.
He didn't make it any easier on himself, that's for sure.
No, but he don't give a shit because
he thinks he's bulletproof, and
yeah,
it's yet to be proven that he's not.
Exactly. John Gotti thought he was bulletproof. Capone thought he was bulletproof. You know, I mean, I'm not comparing him to Gotti or Capone, but he has the same methods in a lot of ways, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going to intimidate the witnesses. I'll intimidate the jurors. I'll intimidate the judge's family. You start off a case by talking about the judge's daughter. I mean, if I was the judge, I'd have to say, you know what?
Yeah.
Enough is enough. I mean, you know, so where's he attack next? Let's see. Everything's persecution. And look, the debates, social media, all this shit that's going on with you. If you haven't made up your mind now between Trump and Biden, I don't think anything can change your mind. I mean, you either hate Trump or you adore Trump. You know, it's like there's no in between.
Well, you know, 32% of the country adores Trump. That's not enough to get
him elected. Right.
Elected. So we'll have to see, because there obviously are some people that are stuck in the middle and don't know which way they're going to do.
I thought it was interesting that 40% of previous Trump voters didn't even know that he was going to trial.
Well, there you
40%.
go. 40%. There you
they
go.
Didn't even know he was in trial.
There you go.
We got to get Art on.
Okay, let's get Art on. Art Levitt. Arthur.
Hey, Frank, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Derek, we okay on Art's picture? We are okay on the sound? I think we are.
Yeah, we're good to go.
Can you frame that down just a little bit, Art, so we can see a little bit less of your head and a little bit more of you? If you can't, frame it. Yeah, that's good. That's perfect. Oh,
okay. It's a little frightening.
Well, have you met Billy O'Connor?
No, we haven't. Nice to meet you, Art.
The legend.
The legend.
I've read your book. I've heard all about you. I'm excited.
Well, what a wonderful thing to hear from a guy who travels in your circles. I'm delighted to hear that. Thank you, sir.
And you sound like everybody I grew up with.
Really? You grew up in the Northeast?
I grew up in Manhattan.
Oh, you grew up in Manhattan?
Yeah.
Did you ever put a fire out in his neighborhood?
Oh, yeah. 1 truck, 2 truck. We were down there, put out some fires. But, you know, firemen, we got to think about firemen. Firemen from the Bronx and Harlem, we got to think about Manhattan firemen, you know, because you go by their rigs and they're all shiny and they always see guys waxing them and stuff like that. We never had time to do that stuff. They said put all the new rigs down in Manhattan and we got the old bombs, you know, because ours were always covered in soot and ashes and brands and stuff like that. We did a lot of work in the South Bronx back in the 70s.
And booze bottles.
And booze bottles. Back when the 70s were burning. You know, when
you were working people.
You guys work for a living. We were working people. Speaking of work, what a list of credentials. Good God.
I met Art. We met in 1991. Is that correct? When you were working for...
At the Bill Bradley event.
Yep. You were a big shot even then. You were working for you were working for Michael Ovitz then. Big shot.
Michael Eisner, but
Eisner.
A big shot in my own mind.
Yeah. But why don't you tell? I mean, you're an entrepreneur, a conservationist. Why don't you tell us about what you're doing now, and we'll get back into the entrepreneurial stuff a little bit later.
My current world is really focused on doing philanthropic work for the environment. And I spend most of my time on several things that are really focused on land and ocean restoration and hopefully long-term solutions to some of our environmental and climate challenge. I figured I had 4 kids. I got to start to make up for the footprint I created.
I think that's absolutely great, man. And you got your BA from the Hamptons, right? St. Hampton, out in LA, Long Island, in marine science, correct?
I did. You guys have done your homework. And I started out working in a shrimp hatchery in Hawaii. And now I've sort of gone back to my roots, and I'm on the board of the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach. I do work for some of the marine protected area doing surveys. I'm on the board of a group that surveys and helps to restore kelp all the way up and down the West Coast. And I'm on a group called Channel Islands Restoration, which focuses on sustainable land restoration of critical landscapes.
Well, I love, first of all, we have that little link in common because my boat is in Channel Islands Harbor. That's where I keep it down in Ventura, my sailboat. So I go out to the islands whenever me and my wife get a chance. We got to Santa Rosa and Anaconda. And what is it?
Is there room for me and Frank on the next trip?
Yeah, Frank won't go on a boat.
Oh, yeah.
Frank won't even get in the car.
Oh, yeah. I am not going to go out on a boat. You can take my spot. All right. So,
we'll meet for a beer at the harbor. How about that?
Yeah, I'm delighted. Meet for a beer at the harbor would be terrific. But I got to tell you, it's great that you're doing that kind of work for Channel Islands because I think Channel Islands is just terrific. We go out there and it's snorkeling and sailing. It's just beautiful.
Well, Art, you're a big diver, aren't you? Scuba diver.
I am. I tell people my hobby is underwater photography, and my second hobby is buying underwater photography equipment. And I go out to the Channel Islands, I would say, once every 2 weeks, and photograph the different critters depending upon what time of the year it is. And I just love it. I love every bit of it. I don't care whether the water's cold or hot or it's sunny or rainy. But, they call it the Galapagos of this part of the world, and it really is an incredible place, those islands.
Really?
Well, I got a question for you because the fact that you're a diver, and how old are you? I'm
67.
You're 67. I'm
67.
I'm 76. I started diving, I guess, when I was about 16. And what's the greatest part of the world that you dove? Where's your favorite place to dive?
I've done Indonesia, Malaysia, South America, certainly the Caribbean, Micronesia, New Guinea, and I have to say, Philippines. That California is one of the most spectacular.
Really?
It is. You have to work a little bit at it, but it's wonderful. I was in Fiji last year, and incredible live coral life. But it's different than California, and so I kind of love the California thing. I'll still go back to the Philippines, or I've never been to Borneo, and I want to do that. But I'm kind of addicted to the California waters.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that. I mean, because I've done some snorkeling around California. So where would you recommend? What's the best snorkeling to go in California? Where do you go?
Well, for snorkeling, I would absolutely go to Catalina, and I would go to the marine park in Catalina. It's mind-boggling. I mean, it's crystal clear. There's all kinds of life there. Tremendous. I mean, you'll see giant sea bass right within distance of the shore. It's really a wonderful experience for experienced people and novices alike.
So, Art, obviously you have a lot of money. So where did you accumulate this money? On Fandango, I would assume that was the gift that keeps on giving. Founder and CEO of Fandango, movie ticket and entertainment company.
Fandango is certainly helping my lifestyle and keeping me alive. And by the way, and Frank knew this because he was there for me during the dark days of Fandango. I would say most of the time I thought it was going to go belly up, but it ended up being successful for a number of people. And, I'm a big believer in stock options. Disney stock options, did very well for me. And so did the Hard Rock Cafe when I was there. So I'm a huge believer. I had a guy that I hired at the Hard Rock Cafe and told him I'm going to give him a bunch of stock options. And he said, I don't really need these. I don't want them. I don't know how they work. He said, just give me more salary. I said, you'll get a little more salary, but take the stock options. And he ended up buying a home after 4 years on those stock options. So I'm a big believer in that.
You started Fandango pretty much on a park bench with your cell phone in Santa Monica?
Yeah, I did. I was on Broadway. There was a park bench under an office that I think used to be Larry David's. And I had 2 cell phones. And it was sort of day one. And I'm sitting down there thinking, okay, I just quit Disney with a huge infrastructure, big staff. What do I do? Where do I turn? I mean, it was quite a learning experience.
And how did Fandango take off? What did you do that made it successful?
Well, I'll tell you what I think launched it was we our owners were the movie theaters, and they had an obligation, and we had an obligation to provide them with a commercial that they were going to play in theater before every movie. And that really was the secret sauce that was going to make the company, because at the time, the technology just wasn't that advanced. It was very expensive and hard to get. So they were going to break the bones of anybody else that was in the business and build the brand for us. And we had developed a commercial basically with all of our money, because 5 out of our 7 investors went bankrupt because they were all the movie theaters. And we spent every penny we had on this commercial, and couldn't get a hold of the ad agency that was doing it. And I ended up driving down to their offices to see that they had filed bankruptcy and closed everything up and locked the commercial in a vault, and we couldn't get it. And we had, I think, 4 weeks in which, and back then there was no digital distribution, in which we had to get the commercials to all the movie theaters, or basically we were going broke. So we found some crazy group of guys that called themselves Help, and each one of them had fake names like Janu and Hope and Hug Me Out. And I don't know, for some reason, I said, we got 3 weeks to get this commercial shot. We got very little money, and it's got to be really creative and fun and memorable. And somehow they delivered it, sent it to the movie theaters in time. And I can remember sitting in the AMC theater in LA the first night that commercial was going to air, thinking, this is it. I'm publicly humiliated. I'm going to be fried. The company is going to go up in smoke. And hearing people in the audience laughing. Now, I didn't realize the commercial was funny. And they were laughing hysterically. Wall Street Journal wrote about it. And this is something that, Frank, you'll definitely relate to. The star of the commercial was a guy named Mr. Fandango. We paid him scale, which I think was like $800. So now all of a sudden we're getting enough business to believe that there's hope that we could possibly succeed. So it's time for the next commercial. So of course we called Mr. Fandango up and said, we're ready to roll, ready to shoot number 2. And he said, oh, well, now I'm like up to $50,000, $60,000 is my rate. Wait a second. No one's ever heard of you until us. Yeah, now I'm afraid I'm overexposed. And so at that very moment, I turned around to our people and I said, we will never again anywhere build a brand or an advertisement around a human. So our next set of commercials were done with paper bags.
I remember those commercials.
And smart.
Yeah, I mean, we interviewed people, real people, then hired ex-Muppeteers to create a paper bag that looked like those people. And we used their voices and paper bags to, guys saying, well, I like to go out and I go clubbing, and then we go to Fandango. And those commercials worked really well. So then Harry Potter came out and everybody wanted tickets in advance, and they started buying on Fandango, and we started to build a business.
Wow. So did you fill a void with this business? Was the inspiration? Did you see a void that needed to be filled? Is that what inspired you?
The No, there was a venture capitalist, a guy named Michael Klein, who was very creative, really saw a lot of opportunities, and he saw that Moviefone had sold to AOL for about $400 million. And he was talking to some movie exhibitors, and the movie exhibitor said, Moviefone made all their money off of our ticketing. We didn't make a penny out of that. And lo and behold, they said, we're going to start a consortium. And it's going to be owned by the movie theaters and by the private equity, the venture capital firm. And they hired me to run it.
That's simple.
I mean,
let me ask you, what prepared you? I see you with so many. I mean, read your bio. I mean, between Disney and the guy who inspired, what's it, DeLeo? Is that his name? Ray DeLeo? Ray
Dalio, yeah.
Am I Ray Dalio, the guy who inspired
Billions
on HBO? You worked for him, and that's where you did a lot of environmental work for him as well. But what was it? Just what prepared you for this life? Besides the biology thing, the Harvard, was that enough to run in that circle?
Harvard. I went to an executive MBA program at Disney. Michael Eisner and Frank Wells gave me an opportunity to run a division, a small division, but to run it. And their criterion was you need to go to this executive MBA program, type program. And it really taught, I think the primary thing that it taught me was you need to be able to filter through the information and discover what is really, determine what's really a priority and what's not, because you can't possibly deal with all the information that you're going to get. I think, in part, I really feel like I've never been prepared for any job that I've ever had, and that most of them have been lucky. I've had great mentors. Michael Eisner, you couldn't ask for anything better. And I've learned a lot from the mentors. I spent a lot of extra time. When I started at Disney, I realized, listen, I don't know how to read a financial sheet. I just had no idea how to read financials. And I realized a lot of the job was having some sense of it. So I went and posted an ad at UCLA at Anderson Business School saying I need a business school graduate tutor to tutor me in finance, and I got one. So I made up for lack of skills or lack of knowledge or ability in any way that I could. Mm-hmm. And it really helped me, and I kept an open mind. There was no task that I was unafraid to do. When I was at Disney, if Michael Eisner said, geez, that parking lot is a mess, it's disgusting, I had no problem with, figuring out what the issues were. Just as, he would say to me, I would sometimes help him go through his mail and sort through, okay, what needs to be followed up on and what doesn't. It was a fantastic learning experience for me.
So on-the-job training and elbow grease was pretty much what you can attribute to it. Not being intimidated.
I always hired people that were better or smarter than me, whether it was human resources people or financial people. And I let them challenge me. I think some of them would say it was painful, but I would seek counsel and say, geez, should we be doing this? Is this the right thing? Or what about if we did this? And if they took one position, I would take the opposite, because I just really wanted to flesh things out. But I've had pretty good luck being surrounded by really, really smart people.
Well, yeah, the circles you traveled in, I guess those are the only people that are surviving to get to where you were. I got to ask you, because between Eisner and, am I pronouncing it Ray Dalio?
Dalio, yeah.
And this is totally subjective question, but who's the smartest guy you ever met?
Your dad?
Well, my dad, of course, he's my hero. I think he was smart, but he had great wisdom for me, all the time. I can remember.
And your dad was the head of the SEC.
Chairman. Yes, he was the chairman of the SEC. But some of the things that I remember from him is, always be positive, always be upbeat, no matter what the circumstances are. It's not going to help if you're sour and down, and not going to help motivate people, not going to help you. He's very tenacious, but not in a bullying way. often in a gentle, compassionate way, but he made his point and pushed it through. And I learned a lot from him. And because he's had so much experience, I mean, it's funny, every once in a while I see my dad's hand coming out of my own sleeve thinking, did I just say that to my kids? Because that was something my dad would say to me, like, he'd say, well, what's the worst that can happen? Of course you can do that. And I'd say that to my kids, and they'd say, Dad, yeah, that's easy for you to say. And I can remember my dad saying it to me and me saying to my dad, yeah, that's easy for you to say. But Michael Eisner, he had an intuition the likes of which I've never seen.
Really?
And he was fun to be around. He had an incredible sense of humor, and he would put people through their paces and make, dramatic changes. Or, one of the things I learned from him was he used to say, it's easy to say no. It's hard to learn when to say yes. And he had an instinct that people just followed, and it worked. I mean, there were some things that didn't work, but in general, and he had an ability to work through with that gut and with that instinct in ways the likes of which I'd never seen. And he motivated people, not necessarily by coddling them, but by pushing the limits to, general traditional thinking, pushing the boundaries, and people saying, well, we can't get this done. It's too expensive. It's too tough. And it's not physically possible. And he knew when enough was enough, and he knew when to push. And it was fun. It was really fun. I mean, it was hair-raising at times, but it was fun.
I got a question about this intuition and instinct, just to jump in, because I want to move from this segment. So Ray Dalio, I think, is I think he meditates and maybe practices some forms of Buddhism. Do those guys, Eisner, Dalio, and yourself, do you guys use any kind of techniques to hone in your intuition or your instincts in life and in business?
So that's a really smart question. I have, severe ADHD, as you can probably tell, and some learning disabilities and things like that. And working for Ray Dalio was challenging. Every phone conversation was recorded. Every meeting was videotaped, and he would often circulate the transcripts or the actual videos, especially if he thought a mistake was made. He would distribute it and say, look at this mistake. So there was a tremendous amount of pressure, and there was a lot of incoming from all areas because he was involved in so many different charities and philanthropies, and one of them was transcendental meditation.
Yeah,
So I, in my role working for his philanthropies, I got involved with, at the time, his chief group was the David Lynch Foundation, which was a wonderful thing. They did transcendental meditation for students, for vets with PTSD, things like that. And I'd been trying to meditate my whole life, but I couldn't do it. It was too much work. It was painful. It gave me a stomach ache or whatever. And so I had to at least try this meditation. So I tried it for like 3-4 months, and I couldn't tell whether I was sleeping or meditating, but I thought, well, what's the difference? No one else. I was just tell everybody else I'm meditating, and if I'm sleeping. And then all of a sudden, after like 5 months, I realized it was no longer painful in the office. I can endure with some joy much more of the things that would occur, and much more of the stresses and the problems and the issues dealing internationally and all that. And I can guarantee it was 100%, a large percent, the meditation. He is a huge believer in that, or at least he was, and really encouraged many other people to do that. Now, if you said to me, in addition to that, what's another lesson you got from Ray Dalio?
And Ray Dalio, for our audience, is one of the richest men in the world, correct?
Yes, and ran the largest hedge fund in the world, and was very interested in philanthropy and committed tremendous amounts of money and was involved in everything from museums to healthcare, natural science. The oceans were a big passion of his, and he had, ships and submarines, and he financed all kinds of different novel research and technology and things like that that really are quite important, quite novel, risky investments. And he was a principle-based person. That was one of his big things, was his principles. And I can remember one of his philanthropies was a guy named Muhammad Yunus that started microfinancing in Bangladesh, where he would take people that couldn't afford to go to banks and encourage them in group pods, so to speak, of ways to be able to borrow enough money so they could start, whether it's a tiny little farm or whether it's an ice cream stand or whatever it was, to build their own independence. And through these pods, they would support each other so they would be able to be successful in repaying their loans. And I can remember we were talking about opening a unit in Harvard Square, and it wasn't budgeted, and there was, it was called Grameen. I remember Ray saying to me, listen, I don't want to focus on whether we should build this one unit or not. What I want to focus on is, can we launch 1,000 Muhammad Yunuses instead of going one by one? Can we create a highly leveraged model that helps people that are living on subsistence globally be able to dig themselves out in this method? And I thought that whole idea of leverage versus, it's working smarter versus working harder was really brilliant in its simplicity and brilliant in its impact.
Right.
I've heard that program is remarkable. I've heard that women repay the loans more readily than men, right? Isn't that a known statistic?
Yes. Yes.
Women entrepreneurs.
And it was so influential in the U.S. And, they really started with very little. And it was kind of unknown. These people didn't have bank accounts. They didn't have resources. They didn't believe that they could do it themselves. And now a woman named Andrea Wong, who was the head of Revlon, is taken over the organization. She does it for nothing, for no pay, $1 a year or something. I mean, it's a very high-level executive who really believes that this is and I agree with her, a tremendous value add. So those are the kinds of things that Ray did. He was a spawner in big solutions as well as, individual things.
Got it.
Wow.
And then you moved on to the Hard Rock from...
I left Disney the first time, and I went and became the CEO of the Hard Rock Cafe International, and man, was that a learning curve.
How so?
It was wild and woolly, and it was not... It had kind of peaked and started to decline a little bit, and things would happen like, I don't know, I showed up in London one day, and some guy meets up with me on a street corner and says, I have the rights to franchise, 15 countries, and if for whatever reason I can't do that, I can take over the lease for the Hard Rock in London, which was our crown jewels. And nobody knew anything about this, and the guy basically was going to take over the company. And things like that would pop up once a week. I mean, I can't even tell you. I mean, I showed up in Brussels looking at a potential location, and somebody calls me and says, "Hey, there's a Hard Rock in Antwerp." I said, "There's no Hard Rock in Antwerp." So I drove that very night to Antwerp and went and said, "Is the manager here?" And the guy says, "I'm the owner." And I said, "Well, I'm the CEO of the Hard Rock. You can't be here." And he says, "Oh, I've been trying to get a hold of you for months." And long story, of course he hadn't. Long story short, he said, "Well, how do I do this legally?" I said, "Well, it's $1 million franchise fee or whatever it is. And this, that, and the other thing." And he shows up in Orlando and he leaves a check for $1 million. And I said, you can't do that. You can't just do that." So he did. By the way, when I left the company, that check was in a frame on the wall because obviously we couldn't ever cash it. But I remember trying to reach the guy and his son saying, he's not available. After we had come to this whole agreement and we sent people over to actually train their people and to do it the right way. "Well, where is he?" He's in the hospital." "Oh, well, tell us what hospital and what room so we can send him flowers." And when they said he had a tracheotomy so he can't talk, is when we knew there was a problem. And in fact, he was in jail for tax fraud. So I mean, stuff like that would literally happen on a routine basis. And I had to learn how to enjoy it and embrace it versus walk around all day long thinking, okay, the world is going to end. I mean, we had a licensee in Jakarta that had a balcony with 200 people on it collapse. It was never ending. And after about a year and a half, I started to just love it. And we were owned by a company in London called Rank, which at the time was a very, very substantial British company. They owned the studios where they filmed James Bond. They owned videotape duplicating companies, which was a big deal back then. They owned resorts and casinos, and they were very formal British. And I can remember every quarter or so, I'd have to go back and make a presentation. And why don't you stay for dinner? I'm thinking, oh boy. And the dinner would be in a room that had a blazing fireplace in the middle of the summer and velvet on the walls and incredible formality and old men smoking cigars. And I can remember at the end of one meal, they passed around a bowl of plums, and I'm taking the plum and just eating it like there's no tomorrow. And I look around, everybody's looking at me because they're using knives and forks to eat their plum. And I thought, oh boy, this Jewish fellow better slink out the door. So I tried to avoid those dinners.
I saw a picture of you with Elton John. I think you had raised a ton of money for AIDS. It was an AIDS foundation thing. It was you with Elton John. And you said you had fun working for Eisner at Disney. In my mind, I would think that the Hard Rock would be a lot of fun, notwithstanding the obvious pitfalls you talked about. But meeting rock stars and hanging out with the glitter, no, didn't do it for you? More fun with Eisner?
It's funny you say that because I don't really know what to say to. I mean, if it was a pro wrestler, Larry David, I could handle. But the rock stars and stuff, I just didn't know what to say or what to do. We were in San Antonio, opening the Hard Rock in San Antonio, and we had Aerosmith for some reason was going to help us, and we were all in a room at a hotel, and we were going to get on these boats on the river there and have mariachis playing. And the mayor of the city came and said, now listen, you guys, we got to be really careful because we don't want people falling in the water. We don't want people jumping in the water. So I want you to be as low key as you can, but still be exciting. And we all got on the boats. And as soon as the boats took off, and I'm telling you, there was 10,000 people if there was one standing on the riverbanks. And Steven Tyler looked up at these people and said, everybody jump in the river. And so I was kind of careful after that. And I remember one time I was in London and they said, hey, we're doing a thing with Elton John and Sting. I said, how fantastic. That's great. You should go in there and say hello. And I'm thinking, what am I going to say to these guys? So turns out the whole place was empty because actually Aerosmith was going to perform for a TV show. And there was only one booth left in there with Sting and Elton John. And I said, I cannot possibly sit there. What am I going to say to them? What am I going to do? And sure enough, I'm sitting there, like literally twiddling my thumbs, thinking, what am I going to say? And then Elton says, so how's Trudy, Sting? And I'm thinking, well, how do I jump in here? And then Elton says, that looks like an Armani blazer. I probably borrowed it from somebody. And I said, it is. Do you like Armani? And then, thank God, he started to evoke and talk, and that was rough. But I would like to have the big parties and the big stuff happen, and then I would kind of slink out the back. My fun was making it happen and watching other people enjoy it. So I wasn't big on the whole celebrity thing.
Well,
Michael Eisner.
Go ahead. No, sorry. Go ahead.
Look, with Michael Eisner, what was fun is his constant demand for quality and creativity. And people would say, well, this is pretty good. Yes, well, it's not going to knock anybody's socks off. It's not a home run. What do we need to do to make it a home run? Well, we don't really have enough time. Well, make enough time, and the way he did it and how he did it, I mean, I had one experience. I opened up a restaurant concept for Disney called ESPNZone, Sports Dining and Entertainment Facility. And it was like 2 weeks or a week before the signage was going to go up in Baltimore. We'd spent all this money and designed it, and they had cranes out there. It was like the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And he called me and said, I hate that name. The name is way too small. He said, I just said, Michael, we're out of time. We're out of money. I can change it later. He said, absolutely not. Don't spend another penny. You will open on time, and you got to fix it. It's too small. This is too big a concept. We've got to state what it is. And he said something like, and by the way, it's your problem, not mine, so don't bother me over Thanksgiving. And, you had to kind of laugh at that, and you had to kind of enjoy it. And by the way, he was 100% right. And stuff like that would happen regularly.
How'd you fix it?
We called it ESPNZone. It was ESPN Grill. We all got together in a room, and Michael could inspire this, not out of fear either. He inspired this out of, wanting to get to that level of excellence and creativity. And everybody got in a room, and we just stayed there until we thought of something that worked, was bigger, accomplished the mission. And there's probably hundreds of examples of any executive that was at Disney at the time that could take you through. And he always added a bit of fun to the experience, I got to say.
That's great.
I find it interesting. Here you are with all these giants of industry. I mean, you're rubbing elbows with them, and yet you're a little intimidated by rock stars. It's like I think Mitchell was on a show and he talked about meeting Bob Dylan in a barbershop or something on a lot, and he didn't know what to say. It was Dylan, and he was like overwhelmed.
Who was that?
Was it Mitchell? One of our guests over the past 3 years. Anyway, he said that he saw Dylan in the barbershop, and he didn't know what to say. He was sitting there for about an hour, and finally Dylan turned around to him and looked at him and said, it can be a bit unnerving. And he said, it sort of set him at ease. But
well, I had at the Hard Rock, I'd always make sure that I had someone around that knew what was what in the music industry, because I'd be around these people and they were stars. I had no idea who they were, and so I'd have somebody sort of whispering to me. And I remember someone said, "Oh, sit down here." This guy, I couldn't even hear the name, and I was having lunch with this guy, and women kept walking up the table and lifting their shirts up and flashing them. And I said, "You got to." What's going on? It was Dave Matthews, and I didn't know who he was. And apparently that was sort of a thing. I was never able to arrange more lunches with Dave Matthews.
No empty seats at those tables.
Well, you brought Drop Dead Fred into America, didn't you?
Oh, Right Said Fred. I forgot about that. My God, you got a memory. I'm driving around. This was at Disney at Pleasure Island, a nighttime entertainment complex. I don't know how you remembered that. I'm driving around somewhere in Orlando thinking, how are we going to make this place pop? It's, it was a nightclub complex on Disney, and it was just not successful. And I said, well, we got to get some cool bands here and some unusual things. And I'm driving around and I hear this song. It's I'm too sexy for me. I thought, what a ridiculous thing. So I called the woman that was our talent booker, and I'm singing it to her because I don't know the name of the song. And all of a sudden, like 3 weeks later, she's got this band called Right Said Fred booked for like nothing, like $1,000 in hotels. And I totally forgot about this. And literally the week they played, they were like the top 10 charts with a bullet. And so that's how we kind of made our mark there, by the way, is finding stuff right before it broke and getting lucky.
That ain't easy, I'm sure.
That ain't easy. But
that was a crazy time.
But they were singing about Billy. Too sexy for your shirt.
Too sexy
for your pants.
I thought he was going to say that I was the guy behind the desk with all the women was popping in.
So now, see, by the way, if we had Billy there, we wouldn't have had the kind of challenges we had in getting the right people there. We did do a lot of things like, all of a sudden there'd be a bunch of people running around from one nightclub to the other, and all of a sudden somebody would say, Madonna's here, which was not true. And then everybody would get crazed and they would say, oh my God, they've got all these celebrities there. And I can remember one night, Michael Jackson came, and I was walking him around with like 10 other people, and we walked into one nightclub that was a 2-level nightclub, and he was on the ground floor, and he was waving to all the people on the balcony. And I could hear all the people on the balcony saying, "Look at that idiot dressed like Michael Jackson." It was Michael Jackson. Yeah, we had a lot of stuff like that. It was that was a fun time. And I could. Here's another example. Michael Eisner saying he would call me and say, he moved me down to Florida to help try to turn Pleasure Island around. It's nighttime entertainment complex. And he'd call me once every few weeks and say, "No one's complaining about you. No one's trying to fire you. You're not doing your job." He said, "I'll know you're doing your job when they're begging me to fire you." And of course, that just inspired me.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he said I wasn't drumming up enough change to aggravate people, to move it fast enough.
Huh.
And I can remember opening night, we changed the whole concept and said, let's do. Actually, one of the guys at Walt Disney World, Tom Elrod, who was head of marketing, came up with the idea, you need to do something really big, like New Year's Eve every night. And I heard that and ran with it. And we created a sort of New Year's Eve-ish event every single night with fireworks and confetti, like 3 feet of confetti. And it was opening night. Michael Eisner called and said, "I'm on the way." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I'm on the way. The plane's landing. I'm going to come and be there for opening night." I said, "Oh, please, give us a few days to work out the bugs." And he was there at opening night, and we thought our capacity was like 6,000 people, and it was about 11:30, and he was standing right at the front gate, and it was now 11:30. We had like 8,000 people in there, and all the managers were going, "We need to shut it. We need to close the gate. Stop letting people in." And Michael Eisner said, "Until I see this on CNN, that it's backed up all the way to the Orlando, traffic is backed up all the way to the Orlando airport, you're not closing the doors." And he inspired people in so many different ways like that. It was really a lot of fun.
Great.
What a unique take he had, though. Imagine that, like no complaints. You're not doing your job.
Yeah.
Everybody complains.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Speaking about unique takes, what's your take on crypto?
I'm a very, very conservative guy. And I'm saying this because I was going to buy $1,000 worth of crypto when it was like at 20, and now it's like through the roof. So I'm maybe making myself feel better, but I'm fairly conservative. Unless something is based on a tangible, real functioning value creator, I'm not particularly interested in it. I'm a very, what little money I have is basically, in stationary and in long-term investments, and I'm not a trader. So I would not. It's not for me. Definitely not for me. I'm surprised that it's climbed as it has. I think it's high risk, and I'm not a gambler.
And did you tell me something about the IRS?
Oh, well, yeah. Not to mention, all right, busted. Not to mention the fact that I know an accountant that used to work for the IRS who told me that if you answer the question on your return that says, "Yes, I bought some crypto," you're an automatic target for an audit.
You're an automatic.
All right,
target.
That's the real reason.
Target for an audit.
Wow, automatic target for an
Yeah.
audit. Wow, that's information that they certainly can use.
You should have had, Bill. You used to have to. You wish you had it when you bought the crypto.
Yeah, well, anything I buy is going to turn to dust anyway. You know that. That's a certainty. I could buy a cemetery and people would stop dying.
There you go.
But I want to segue for a second back to your passion, because I do have a question that I'm really interested in. What do you think is the number one threat to the oceans today? Do you think it's climate change?
That's just where I was going to go.
Do you think it's climate change? Do you think it's plastics in the water? Do you think it's the perennial fishing nets? What is it?
I think it's absolutely climate change. I think the heat is the one issue. I worked with one guy that in the West Coast, there was a starfish that used to eat all of the sea urchins. Now that starfish is functionally extinct. So the sea urchins have gone crazy, and they have basically destroyed the kelp beds. And the kelp is not only is a breeding ground for over 700 species of animals, but it's a huge carbon sequester and a huge generator of oxygen. And so that's really problematic. Now, other people have found ways that they can breed these starfish. The problem is you can't reintroduce them into the ocean because the ocean temperature has increased so much. And there's a million examples of that. And I think, I used to think, because I'd be around Michael Eisner or Ray Dalio, I used to think, well, on a large scale, let's just legislate major changes to how we behave and how we act and what we do. But that's just not going to work in this world. And one of the things I've learned from my girlfriend is act local because you can make a difference. Now, that's pretty damn hard when it comes to things like climate change, but you can do your part. And whether it's solar or battery cars or water conservation or not using certain, drying functions on your dryer or things like that, you can actually make a change. But I definitely think the number one threat is climate change. I mean, look at what's happening with this weather everywhere. And in my mind, the solution is not to say we're going to mandate in Los Angeles that everybody has to have an air conditioner in their house. I mean, that's part of the mitigation. But I think we need to start thinking about, in general, different ways to live without necessarily sacrificing, the whole of our lifestyle. And I think, social justice, I've started to learn environmental justice. I can afford to air condition my house if I so choose. But there's a lot of people my age and a lot older that can't. And it's, you suffer. And so I really think that climate change is a huge challenge. Now, my frustration is, look, I'd like to be able to wake up in the morning and say I can, on a global basis, change it. Where I can't, I operate on a local basis. I drive less. I ride my bike. There's a store where I live that refills any of your plastic containers for whether it's shampoo or home goods. I bought gift certificates to that and give it out to 20 different people in the community that I think are influencers. They make me feel good, certainly, helps me emotionally. But if it spreads, that'll start to make an impact. So I try to operate locally where I can.
What's your opinion of the Trump administration environmental policies?
I think it's crazy. I think climate deniers are crazy, and I think they're hurting themselves. So, I can understand people not wanting to take an economic haircut. I really can understand it. Big oil, things like that are making gigantic profits. I think, they're going to have to make the consumer is going to have to force some changes. I think Trump is not someone that has any sensitivity to that kind of thing whatsoever, the environment. Either is a climate denier or just doesn't care, puts people that are anti-climate into, positions in agriculture and the EPA and places like that. But I think it's up to us, the rest that do believe in it, to help do everything we can to create a sustainable lifestyle and a sustainable world. Agriculture is a gigantic issue with everything from fertilizer to pesticides. And, the cost of climate denying is way more than the cost of climate remediation and creating sustainable agriculture where you either organic or recyclable opportunities. And I think there's plenty of it that can be done without a tremendous amount of pain and sacrifice.
I was scuba diving in 1968 in the Gulf of Siam, and I always think about the first time I put the mask on and everything, looked underneath the water, just lit up, I couldn't believe the reefs and how beautiful and everything they were. And I think today that my granddaughter or my grandson will never see that again. Are you optimistic? Do you think that the reefs will come back? And like the Keys, they're dead. It's like so many places I dive, it's just not the same.
it's hard to imagine the Keys the way they are. It really is hard for me to come to grips with that because, it's local and relatively local. And I have to be optimistic. I have to believe that we can pull it together and make changes. There's a huge amount of people working on different elements in the ocean. There's a guy from Scandinavia, I can't remember his name, that has built ships that are doing nothing but recovering plastics from the Pacific garbage patch. There are multitudes of people and organizations that are working in different aspects. I think it is going to take some major legislation, but the nature has an incredible resiliency to it. And I think right now aquarium in the Pacific, for example, is trying to breed kelp that is much more temperature tolerant so that it could thrive in the warmer temperatures. I think there are people that are making those efforts with coral. I don't think anybody really foresaw the kind of devastation that they've seen recently in Florida. So I'm not sure what will happen there. But, I think more and more of the world, unfortunately, is feeling the effects of that climate change. And it is going to require more and more creative thinking, some sacrifice, and real dedication to trying to reverse that trend because nature is very, very resilient.
Well, that's a positive note for us to close this, I think, interview with Art Levitt.
I hope Art becomes a virus and his ideas spread because
before-
we could definitely use some help down below that ocean.
Before we let Art go, Derek, do you have any questions for?
I think I got my questions out, so I think we're good to go.
And Billy?
Art, pleasure, real pleasure to meet you, man.
When's the last time you played
Thank you,
racquetball?
guys.
When's the last time you played racquetball, my friend?
I swear it was with you when I never saw a guy more tenacious, and you're an amazing guy. I loved your book. First of all, I thought it was incredibly revealing, insightful. Some parts of it were difficult to read through just because of the tragedy that was occurred. But I thought it was incredibly honest and really wonderful. I've known you for years and years, and you're exactly the same but wiser. So I think that's even better.
And older and grayer.
There you go.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Real pleasure. Real pleasure.
Great interview.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Terrific
you.
guy.
He's a terrific guy.
Yes, totally unpretentious, just a really nice guy, and like I be frank, I tell you the truth, if I travel in circles he did, I wouldn't let you talk to me.
I wouldn't want to talk to you.
I mean, if I was successful, who the hell would need you?
Yeah, exactly. That's why you're not successful. Well, speaking of another successful guy, let's get Joe West on the line.
Cool.
Damn, you didn't say it. Nice.
I didn't say way out west.
Yeah.
Tired of hearing that old chestnut.
No, I just replayed it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Great.
It would have been a hell of a segue if he wasn't on it. Hey, Joe, it's good to see you. Were you born an asshole or what?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad said when I grew up, I could be anything I wanted to be, so I'm an asshole.
Oh, that's funny. How you been, my friend?
I'm good. How you doing?
Fine.
I got the Joe West golf shirt on. I like them. That's looking good in blue.
It does look good in blue.
That is not blue.
That's not blue.
Is this green?
Frank, both of us. What do you mean it ain't blue?
What color is it?
Joe, what color is that?
What are you asking him for? He's blind.
An umpire. Oh, what do you know? He's an umpire.
Speaking of umpires, Joe, tell me your take on it. Angel Hernandez retirement.
Well, he was getting a lot of flack from social media, and I think it was bothering his family. He's always showed up for work. He's done his job. Through his legal trials and tribulations with baseball, it all got thrown out of court, and how it got thrown out, I don't know, because the depositions that baseball's people had to give were very damaging. I do know that when he filed the lawsuit in 2017,
And tell us about what the lawsuit was about.
the lawsuit was about a discrimination against him for his minority status. And part of the suit stated, in fact, and you can check all these because they're true, that there's only been one since 2017 minority crew chief in the history of baseball. And Angel at the time had been the most used substitute crew chief when a crew chief was out of anybody in the history of baseball, but they refused to promote him to a crew chief position. Not only that, they refused to give him a World Series since, I want to say, back in the 2010 era. So it'd been maybe 2005, but he hadn't been promoted like he was when Frank Robinson was his boss. And when Joe Torre took over, Joe didn't give him a chance. And he had a play in Cleveland where a ball went over the fence and hit a railing and came back. And when they went to look at the replay review, there were 3 umpires. Angel just happened to be the acting crew chief. And they couldn't tell where the ball hit, so they had to leave it in play. And it was a home run, which everybody saw on television because they were working at high definition television. But the little screen that they had to look through was not high definition, and they couldn't see it, so they couldn't change it. So the next day, Major League Baseball didn't take up for Angel. They attacked him. And that was the start of the social media just picking on him. In fact, Peter Gammons made a statement that Angel Hernandez doesn't want replay. That's the reason he didn't overturn it, and that wasn't true at all. But like I said, before 2017, there'd only been one minority crew chief.
And since
Angel's lawsuit, there have been 6 promoted to crew chief, and they had 4 more new hires. Furthermore, the staff of Major League Baseball moved Joe Torre, Randy Marsh, and Peter Woodfork to other positions and replaced them with 4 minorities. So what Angel did probably helped the hiring practices of Major League Baseball, and everybody that has gotten a new job because of him should be thankful for it. How he got in the situation with all these people just beating him up, it was just people piling on mainly because of the internet, and people would say stuff, and they sit behind a computer and they blast whoever they want to. It's kind of like they do to politicians and other umpires, and we've all been subject to that, and that's just the way it goes. And I'll give him credit; he stood up to this very well. And when baseball called to ask him if he wanted to leave, he said, "Well, not really, but if we make it a mutual agreement, then I'll agree." And so they've obviously cut a deal with him to leave. So that's what's happened so far that I know of.
you think they made him an offer that he couldn't refuse?
Well, it wouldn't have been like Don Corleone, but it was probably a substantial offer, and I don't blame him for leaving. If they gave, he was the first guy under the contract that didn't get a severance payment, because that severance payment stopped in 91, and that was the year he was hired. So he didn't get a severance payment, so to speak, with his retirement. So I don't know all the particulars, but I'm sure he got something equal to that.
Wait, I got a question. So this is something, so these new hires that are put into new positions, we're talking about, this is 1967, 1970, 1968, or is it 2024? Which one is it?
2024.
I mean, don't you guys find this to be like completely ridiculous? Like, there should be more outrage on the stage here today.
I'm Irish. It doesn't affect me.
Well, I'm surprised that there was there was only so limited representation as of 2017.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And that crew chief was Richie Garcia, and they fired him because of union activities in 99.
Wow.
So he was the only minority crew chief up until 2017 in the history of baseball. So you can say what you want to, but Angel's lawsuit had merit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how they got it thrown out of court is probably because they had more lawyers than Angel did.
Oh yeah, they'll kill you with lawyers because they own them all.
Yeah.
They own them all.
But it was he had a career. It was spanned almost 30 years, and he didn't miss work. Last year he had a back problem, so he was out for a limited time. But they've gone to people like these. It's called umpire auditor, and it's the most bogus online group I've ever seen. They grade the umpires, and I don't know how to grade them because they don't have the equipment to grade them. So they're just looking at the game on TV and say, this guy missed this pitch, this guy missed that pitching. And the guy's made a career out of it. And he's a college kid from Boston who doesn't know anything about umpiring. But his site is reviewed every day. In fact, when you read a column about an umpire, they say, did he miss the pitch? It'll be whether umpire auditor said he did or not. And they don't grade the umpires.
Yeah, because
they have a system that grades the umpires.
Because as you said, each network has got a different strike zone. So
yes,
it may be off by an inch or so. And you talk about clipping the corner of a plate. How many times do you see a baseball clipped a corner of the plate and the umpire get the call correctly? Most times.
Yeah,
and that's crazy to me. It's so precise. It's hard for me to understand what they're doing. And also, I can name a couple of other umpires, but now that you're out of the business, now that Hernandez is out of the business, I wonder how many people can actually name two umpires, no less.
Yeah.
I mean, even one. Billy, do you know the name of another umpire?
Just McSherry, because
no, I'm talking.
because I knew in the Bronx, but
I'm
not
talking
today.
About,
no,
I'm talking about live.
No,
Derek.
Today, no.
Oh no, I don't know any umpires.
Yeah, so I mean, the few that I know, if it wasn't for Joe, I wouldn't know any of them.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
No, seriously.
So T.J. Simers, who recently passed away, had said the reason I like Joe is because he's part of the entertainment. He makes the game better. There are no other umpires with personality anymore, and their personality was such a big part of the game. I think, anyway.
Well, looking at it that way, you remember guys like Dutch Rennert, because when he'd call strikes, he'd run right off the TV screen.
Yeah, Emmett Ashford.
Yeah, and Emmett Ashford was colorful. Ron Luciano was colorful. Lee Wire.
Absolutely.
Lee Wire had this real high-pitched voice. He'd go, strike one. And the hitters would turn around and see who it was. And, of course, he was about 6'9", and then they'd see how big he was, and he'd turn right back around.
Yeah.
So like Mike Tyson's voice, right? Strike two.
Strike two.
Wow.
But you put a twist on things there when you say that you don't know the names of them. When we started working both leagues instead of just the National League or American League, it was hard for the players to know who you were too. I mean, you could tell the difference in the umpiring in the American League and the umpiring in the National League. There was no trash talking in the National League. We didn't put up with that because we didn't want people throwing at each other, and so we didn't allow that. In fact, if you'd put National League umpires in basketball games, they'd have kicked out Michael Jordan a dozen times because he was one of the biggest trash talkers there ever was.
So was Larry Bird.
Larry Bird was bad, yeah. But and I know Charles Barkley personally, and I asked him one time. I said, "Why do you give officials a hard time?" He said, "I only give the ones a hard time that take it."
Yeah.
He said, "The ones that don't take it, I don't give them a hard time."
Well, that segues me into another area. The review system. I think the review system is good for baseball because you get the call right. But what it's taken out of baseball is the arguments. I mean, I used to love Earl Weaver coming out or Billy Martin coming out of the dugout and John with you guys. How much less arguing is there now in baseball due to the review system.
Well, when they put in the replay system, we thought all the arguments on the field would go away, but they didn't. They would, the manager would come out and he would argue the replay. And the first year we had replay system, you'd think our objections would go down, but they went up 30% because the managers were getting kicked out for arguing with the replay because that was automatic. But the point being is it's improved the game. It's improved the umpiring because the umpires look at stuff in replay. They go to replay 2 to 3 weeks a year and they learn what everybody else is doing and they learn positioning. And it's the best tool we have for teaching young umpires about where to go and what to do in certain situations and stuff like that. So I think the replay system has helped more than just in the fact that there's fewer arguments and the fact that they're trying to make their mistakes correct is a good thing. I mean,
but isn't that boring? Isn't that boring being right all the time?
Well, I would know. I thought that when I was umpiring, Frank.
So are you saying that the umpires, that in your opinion, the majority of umpires welcome the replay? Are they happy?
Oh no,
no.
Oh no. In the beginning, they hated it because they thought replay would take their job, but they didn't realize they had to have somebody on the other end that had to have the same skill and ability they did. So they weren't going to put a techie in charge of calling a guy out at second base or making a ruling like when you have a protest. It goes to the replay system so they can review the rule book and make sure everything's been handled correctly. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's improved the umpiring profession. I don't know that we can say that the umpires are better today because back when they had fewer teams and fewer umpires, naturally that group of skilled people had to be the best in the world, which they still do. But the point is, when you go from 68 umpires to close to 100 every year, they're gonna be some people there that shouldn't be there, which is like the expansion system. When you expand baseball and you add teams, there are going to be players on those expansion teams that don't belong in the big leagues.
But Joe, let me ask you a question. How often does the umpires turn over? I mean, two or three a year?
Yeah, some of it do. I mean, a couple of years ago, they had like 8 leave, and that was a big blow to their system because you can't bring 8 people up here and expect them to perform like the 8 that left. You know, and the year I retired, I think there were 4. So in the last couple of years, within the last 3 years, they've had 20 umpires, close to 20 umpires leave.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that big.
No, I didn't either.
Wow. Do you have anything else, Billy?
No, just good to see Joe. It's been a bit.
It's been a bit.
See him. How's your golf game?
It's pretty good. We got rained out in Nashville. Played in the tournament in Nashville. It was the Volunteers of America, and the guest speaker the night before was Terry Bradshaw. He was funny as he could be. He didn't let the mediator talk. He asked one question and he talked for 20 minutes. He asked the second question, he talked for 20 more minutes. And when the guy said, "We got to go," he said, "No, we're not. We're not leaving yet." Somebody was a big corporate company there that spent $52,000 on an auction item. And it was 10 bottles of that fancy whiskey. What's it called? It's a bourbon.
Oh, I know what it is. It's
Pappy Winkle.
Pappy Van
Winkle. Yeah. Yep. It was only 10 bottles. Now, one of them, the oldest one, was probably worth $3,000, but all 10 of them couldn't have been worth $50,000. So when Bradshaw got on stage, he said, "Open one of those bottles and let me have a sip." He's drinking bourbon through the whole speech.
Oh.
But he was hilarious. He was really fun, and he was good for the group. I've never seen people laugh so hard and so often at one skit anywhere, but he was hilarious. So he said something about the immaculate reception. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember. Franco Harris
hit the guy, and Franco Harris caught the ball, and he said, "Here I was, and I had thrown the ball, and when I heard the crowd cheer, all I could think of was, here goes my commercials. Here goes my day in the sun. I'm going to have all kinds of commercials and all kinds of ads and stuff." And then they told him what happened. He said, "I'll be a son of a bitch." if Franco Harris had made his block in the backfield, I wouldn't have had to run out of the pocket. But he carried on, and he was hilarious. It was fun. He told about his job as a fishing guide. He said, I got $50 a day, and I didn't even know where the fish were.
Hilarious.
You had a question, Derek?
Joe, I got a question about country music. You know, since I played you that song earlier today, what do you think? Do you think country music has changed at all?
Well, yeah, I do. There's a lot going on in the industry. Some of it is all corporate. I had a nice visit with Joe Bonzel, who's fighting ALS, when I was in Nashville. I went by his house and sat down with him, and he said, when we were at MCA, every time we put a record out, it went right up the charts.
And Joe was with Alabama, correct?
No, Joe was with the Oak Ridge Boys.
Oh, Oak Ridge Boys, sorry.
Yeah. And he said, when we were at MCA, he said, see that wall over there? And there was 20-some gold records on the wall. He said, we were at MCA. Every time we cut a song, it'd get on the charts, and we'd sell a bunch of albums. He said, then somebody came to us and said we should go to RCA. And we're thinking, well, that's great. That was Elvis's label, and we go over to RCA. And then he said the guy that recruited us at RCA was a guy named Joe Galante. Now, Joe Galante was an old-time country guy. If Joe Galante called you and said, we want to put you on RCA, you jumped at it. So they did. They jumped at it. And Joe Galante left to go to the New York office. Well, now their connection in Nashville is gone. And he said the guy that they put us with, every time we'd bring him a song, he'd say, no, we're not doing that. He said, Achy Breaky Heart, we had that. He said, no, we don't want you to cut that. It's too up-tempo, too preppy. He said, Reba McEntire had a song that was given to us first, and he wouldn't let us cut it. And he said, so the industry has changed according to who's actually running the ship there.
Interesting.
And so sometimes, and he did say this, he said that guy is probably working at a Pizza Hut somewhere because he didn't know anything about the business.
Right.
But yeah, sometimes it depends on who's in charge of the ship. It's just like anything else. If you have the right people running the right thing, that was one of Waylon's biggest problems with Nashville. He said the record labels won't let the artists have any input. Well, the artist is the guy that has to go out and perform it. The artist is the guy that has to go out and sing it like it's in his heart, And I'll give you a perfect example. When they gave Willie Nelson's song Crazy to Patsy Cline, she hated it. She despised it. And it was her biggest hit. But what happened when she went in to record it, she was trying to sing it like Willie did on the demo, and she didn't like it. So the producer of the record said, you go in that room over there and you take the words and you sing this like you would sing it. Don't sing it like he sings it. You sing it like you would sing it. He said she came out, one cut, one take, done.
Nice. Wow.
Now, that's letting the artist handle the material, and it worked. Willie was touring with Ray Price when that song hit. He was playing bass for Ray Price. And the guy handling his affairs in Nashville said, you got a residual check this week. And it was about a month after the song had been released. And they're staying 2 and 3 to a room because the bands had to bunk together. They didn't have enough money to put everybody in a single room. So Willie said, well, how much is the check for? He says $250,000. He said, I'll call you back. He hung up the phone. He looked at his 2 roommates and he says, tell Ray I'll be at the Ritz if he needs me.
Hey, Joe, if you knew you were going to have this much fun, would you retired earlier?
Absolutely. I'd have left 4 or 5 years earlier.
Well, that's great. So good to have you.
Always good seeing you, Joe.
We'll see you again in a couple of weeks. And
Absolutely.
Give a hug to Rita.
You got it. You guys take care. It was always great to see you.
Yes,
Always great seeing you, brother. Take care.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye-bye.
That's funny stuff, huh?
Wow. We had some
$250,000. Crazy.
Some show today, huh? Art Levitt, entrepreneur, conservationist, Joe West, Major League umpire, wit and
Frank
wisdom.
Pace, olive oil voice, Skinny John.
Well, I hope the audience has liked it.
I hope so.
It's a fun episode.
It was a good episode. The guy's a terrific guy to watch.
Both of them.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Both of them.
All right. So I guess we got to say goodnight. Say
All right.
goodnight. Day, good night.
All
Was
right.
it good day or good night?
It's Deo.
Deo, Deo.
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 Daylight coming,
Day,
I
Deo,
wanna
day,
go.
Deo, day, day.
Daylight coming,
And
they
I
want
wanna
to go home.
Day, Deo, day, Deo, day, Deo.
Fade out, Billy.
There you go. There
Please.
you go.
There you go. There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
You can't say that on television anymore.
You can't?
No.
Oh, what kind of world are we living in?
What kind of world are we living in, indeed? All right, folks. See you next week.
All right, take it easy. Thanks for looking in. We appreciate it. Read books. They're good,
Especially ours.
especially yours.
Next week's guest, actor, director, and star in the iconic role of Bubba in the iconic film Forrest Gump, Michael T. Williamson.
We'll see you next week.